Hi and welcome back. I'm really excited about this lecture because we finally get to take some of the things that we're learning and put them together in a just fun and funky project. So what we're going to do is take these two images, this background of this barn and this coffee mug, and we're going to put them together like this just for fun and so we can practice some skills in a real hands-on way. Okay? So I'm going to close out of this and we will start from scratch. And what I want you to do is go ahead and open up the two images that are attached to this lecture. You can either download them and then open them in Photoshop, or just click them in the lecture and open them straight into Photoshop. I already have them saved on my computer, so I'm going to click Control O or Command O on your Mac. I'm going to grab those images, open them up. I'm going to do that again for the second image. Grab the coffee mug. If you get this pop up, just ignore it and click OK. We'll talk more about color management down the road. And now that we have our two images open, you'll notice something different that you haven't seen before. We have two tabs up here. One is our cappuccino.jpg image, and the other one is called barnedits.jpg. And if I click on this, I can toggle back and forth between the two images. And you can have quite a number of images open at the same time and be working back and forth with them within the limits of what your computer can handle. But we have these two images. We're going to start out in this cappuccino image, and we're going to press the letter W to change to our quick selection tool. And then we're going to select this cappuccino mug. And the size of cursor that I have right now is pretty good. Although remember, you can adjust it by pressing the left square bracket key to the left to make it smaller, the right square bracket key on the right to make it bigger. Those are located next to the P. So I'll make it a little bit smaller. And what I can do is either click once and let it select what it wants. And you can see it did a pretty darn good job. It just is looking for all the white basically. And then if it missed anything, I can click some more. Or you can also click and just kind of drag around your image. And you'll see I messed up a little bit there, so I might zoom into that and fix it. I'll go Z for zoom, click a couple of times, go back to my quick selection tool, which is W, make my cursor smaller. And then to fix this little mess, I'll hit the Alt key, which gives me a minus. That means I'm subtracting from my selection. And I could just gently work along this edge. I can go right there too. Definitely don't want that brown in there. Kind of feather along the edge like that if you like. And then maybe even, you can kind of work back and forth, okay? It's not a bad idea to hold down the space bar to get the move tool, and you can move around the edge and just check your little marching ants here. That's what this dotted line is. And make sure it's clean and it goes right along your edge, which it does. Now I'm going to go back to full screen, so I'm going to hit Control 0, Command 0 on a Mac. And now I have the cappuccino mug selected, and this is where it gets fun. Now we're going to go to our Move tool, which if you remember is the letter V, and now I'm selected on the Move tool, and now you get to actually practice using the Move tool. All I'm going to do is going to left click on this mug, and I'm going to get a hold of it. Now this is the fun / tricky part. You're going to hold the mouse down as you drag this cappuccino mug up to this tab where it says Barn Edits. Notice it now flips to the next tab, which is my other image. Now I'm still holding the left mouse button. I'm going to bring it into this, and you see now there's this little plus sign with an arrow. I'm going to drag it into the middle, and I'm just going to let go. And it drops it into my image. Awesome, right? So we've just combined one part of one image with another image. Now we can just tweak this a little bit to help it to fit this image a little bit better. So what we can do is now we can grab it and move it where we want it to. And I'd say right there is about good. And now I'll show you one other cool trick. If you hit Control T or Command T on your Mac, that's going to bring up these little controls. This is the transform controls, which means you can now transform this chunk of this image. And you can grab this corner with a left mouse click and you can drag it bigger or smaller. Now on some versions, if you grab it and just start to stretch, you'll notice that if you don't stretch it just right, you'll distort it, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to release the mouse and I'm going to hit Control or Command Z to undo what I just did. And now I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I hover my mouse over that little box. And now if I click and pull, even if I go off to the side, it's going to keep the same proportions, and that's very important. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this down just a little bit, probably like that, so it doesn't look quite so surreal. And then you can either just hit Enter, or you can go click this little check mark up here. Okay, I'll just hit Enter, and that basically completes the transformation and places that where I wanted it in the size that I wanted it. So again, that's Control or Command on the Mac and T to give you the little transform controls. And then some versions you'll need to just click and drag, and you'll just have to experiment with this to see which one works for your version. But in most versions that you're going to hold down Shift and drag. Okay? And then hit Enter to complete that transformation, or you can click here. Okay, now we've placed our coffee cup in this field, but you can see it looks a little unnatural anyway, but it looks extra unnatural because it looks like it's just floating here because we don't have a shadow. So now we're going to put a shadow in with our brush tool. And to explain how we're going to do this, I want to bring your attention over here to our panels. Remember when we started talking about these panels and how you could customize them, but we didn't really go into too much detail. Well, in the next few lectures, we're going to talk a lot about layers. So I want you to look at this layers panel for a moment. And if this doesn't show up like this, make sure you go up here to Essentials and click on Essentials. If you already have it on Essentials, click Reset Essentials, and that should bring it like this. If for any reason that doesn't work for you, you can go to Window and grab the Layers panel and just click on it and it will open up for you, okay? But down in the Layers panel, and we'll talk about all of these things up here later, but I want you to just notice these two things right here. We have two layers. One is our background, and one is called Layer 1. And you can see these tiny little icons down here, and in fact I can make those bigger so you can see them better. You can see the background has our barn and field image, and the Layer 1 has this little cappuccino mug, if you can see that. And the cool thing about layers is I can hide these and show them by clicking on this little eyeball. So I can hide the background layer, and you see only our coffee cup, and these little checkerboards in the background just show that there's nothing there, or that's transparent. And then I can bring that back by clicking on the eyeball, and I can hide the cappuccino mug. Okay, and I'm going to go into layers a lot more in depth because they're super important, but for now just know that if we click on Layer 1, then we're going to do work on Layer 1. If we click on the background, then we're going to do the work on the background, and Layer 1 will sit on top of it. So we're going to grab our brush tool by pushing the letter B on our keyboard, and you can see it's now turned to a brush, and that's a pretty good size. We could go a little smaller or a little bigger, and we'll go into more details with the brush tool later too, but this is just some hands-on experience for you. To set your brush tool at the right setting, I want you to come up here and look at the opacity, and you can change that to 30%. You can use this drop down. If you have a newer version, you can hover your cursor right here, and you'll notice you can click and drag, and it has these little arrows that allow you to change it. Or if you want to use a shortcut key, while you have the brush tool, you just hit the number 30 and hit Enter. If you're not selected in that square, you can also just hit the number 3 for 30%, or 4 for 40%, or 5 for 50%, and so on. But we're going to do 30% opacity. That just means it's not going to be completely black. And then you're going to go up here and make sure that your hardness right here is all the way down. And again, you don't need to understand all of this. We'll go into more detail later. And then finally, make sure that this shows a black little square on top here. And if it doesn't, you can click right here and this will just reset it for you. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go hover over the edge of this cappuccino mug, and we're selected on the background, so you just click on this, and we're just going to paint on this background. But this is going to be on top, so it's not going to be affected. And you'll see I just am going to click and hold and drag. You see it's painting a little bit of a shadow there. And I'm going to do that again, click and hold and drag. A little bit more of a shadow, and you can do this as many times as you want. If you do it too many times, you can hit Control Z to undo one. But we just click and hold and drag, and try not to get up here because it will paint up above the mug and then it looks like you have a shadow up there. So we try and stay down here. If you need to make your tool a little bit smaller, you can do that. But we're just painting with a soft brush and putting a little bit of shadow in there. Maybe a little darker just right along the edge here. But every time you release the mouse and click again, it's going to just make it a little bit darker. So you do it like that, and that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to have you go do this on your own. And if you really want to get the most out of this, post your image to the question and answer section so that we can see how you did. And if you want an extra challenge, I would challenge you to take another image like this, some kind of landscape, and a different object. It could be a soccer ball, a coffee cup, a guitar, or something. You want to make sure that it's sitting on a flat surface or it'll be really hard to match up. But then use the techniques that we just used to cut it out and place it on that image and put a brush stroke underneath it to put a little shadow. Okay, one thing I should have mentioned is that we actually want to do our brushing on a new layer, not directly on the background. So you really should go to this background layer and make sure it's selected and hit Control J on a PC or Command J on a Mac to make a new copy so that you're working non-destructively. Another thing I want to mention is when you go to your cappuccino mug to cut it out, if the click and drag method doesn't work for you, there's another way you can do it. Once you have it selected, you can hit Control C or Command C on a Mac to copy it, and then go over to your barn and hit Control V or Command V to paste it. That's if the click and drag method doesn't work. You can even save this if you want for practice by clicking Control Alt S to save as, rename it, save it as something else, and you're done. At this point, you're starting to learn a lot, so go for it. Don't forget to stand up and walk around if you get stuck or frustrated, ask questions, and I'll see you in the next lecture.